Hey guys, Cleed here. Wanted to check in after season 1 of Dragonflight has been out and kind of sharing my progress of where I've been so far. The video playing in the background here is a Raszageth run I did where I actually got invited and we were able to kill the boss on the first pull, which is very nice considering that at the time of that recording and run, it was 2 a.m. the Monday before reset. So very nice to actually get that boss killed. Wasn't thinking that I was able to get it down that week, but decided to join one last group and see what happens. As I mentioned in the last video, I'm taking a more, I would say, casual approach. Not completely casual in that I'm still playing a good amount, but just pugging everything that I can, since I right now can't guarantee you when I can play the game and have a set rating schedule, which I actually think is the majority for a lot of players in WoW, right? It's kind of hard to guarantee that you can play at a certain amount of time for 12 to 16 hours every single week. That's very intense for most people. So I think maybe this presents a good representation of, I think, what you can actually try to achieve if you can't raid, especially Mythic raid at a consistent level, right? So raid wise, I was able to clear just about every boss at some level the first week, which the only boss that I didn't clear on normal was Teros, mainly just because I had to hop around different pub groups all the time, and I really also just didn't need to loot from Teros, and I was able to clear it from Heroic anyway, so I didn't see need to clear it. So did do all 8 of the bosses, and then as far as Heroic, I cleared the first 4, which was kind of nice, I think, from a pugging perspective on the first week, to just actually have to queue up for the groups, and actually being accepted and being able to clear that amount of content, which is pretty great. I do think from just like a goaling perspective, probably the most important thing for pugging is just to try to identify a piece of weapon or really important loot from any of the earlier heroic bosses and just try to get that clear every week. For me, for example, that was Prime Council. It drops a 402 eye level two-handed weapon. So my goal is just to try to get that weapon every single week. So as long as I can clear up to Hero Council every single week, realistically, I could just pug for a group that only does that boss, right? Because I don't really need some of the other stuff. And then, you know, whatever tier pieces I can get, great. Those are all going to be pluses to what I can gather. I did also very luckily get the Whispering Incarnate Icon trinket from Heroic, which is pretty nice considering one in the journal it says it's rare. I don't know how rare that it actually is to get, but it is extra rare because when I looked at it when it dropped, it was able to roll strength, intellect, and agility, which means when you're rolling on that trinket, you're rolling against the entire raid, right, when you're pugging. So luckily the item 1 dropped, and 2 I was actually able to win the roll on it. So that was a really good plus to my week there. Overall, however, even with that lucky like trinket and stuff, I would say my loot drops were probably average. I started the week with something like, I think 370 to 372 eye level. I ended with 388 equipped by end of the week. Now that did very quickly get bumped up to 391 equipped because I opened my vault and I got a Mythic tier shoulder piece from Mythic Plus. So it's also kind of crazy how well Mythic Plus can actually help gear you just as a source by itself without doing anything else, since you can get Mythic eye level tier piece from just doing Mythic Plus from your Great Vault each week. So I mean, if you get really lucky, you could just get a tier piece every single week from your vault, and then you'll have 4 pieces of tier by the end of a month, right? And you don't even have to step a foot into raid, right? It's not like you don't get the tier pieces until you kill a boss, as far as I'm aware of. I just got the tier shoulders from Mythic, and I haven't stepped foot into Mythic. So, but of course, the other end of Mythic Plus loot is that it's all one, mostly I think for people going to be pugged. So the loot can be wildly RNG, both in the weekly vault, but also the end dungeon loot. Right, for example, one of the days I spent a whole day of doing Mythic Plus, and not a single piece of loot actually dropped. That RNG can just happen, right? For right now, you get 2 pieces of loot, and there's 5 people. There's a chance where you could do a bunch of Mythic Pluses and not get a single piece of loot. Also, on the note of tier, I actually wasn't aiming for a lot of tier pieces. One, due to how weak Fury's tier seemed, and also the fact that I wasn't Mythic rating. But luckily, Blizzard did actually buff the Fury 2 piece from 10% increased crit on execute to 25%. So instead of getting 1 free Juggernaut stacks, we now get 2.5 stacks for free. And on top of the stacks that you can actually get. So perfect for me, because with that tier piece that I got from the vault earlier today, I now have 2 pieces. So 25% crit, increased crit on execute at all times. Perfect. And I think from a casual, like just pugging perspective, having 2 pieces of tier piece after the first week does seem pretty nice. One, considering nobody is feeding me tier pieces, so if it does drop, I have to roll on it. And on top of that, the Evoker class is now also on the token that the Warrior token is on. That's just like another class that you have to compete with for token pieces. So great to see there. And especially, I would say pug wise, I have seen a good amount of Evokers. They do seem pretty popular at the moment. Another huge thing about gearing that I just haven't really done in the past, especially right now where I'm doing all the gearing myself, right? There's no like care packages that our guild or sending us in the past. And what that is crafting. There's 2 aspects of crafting that I think is important. One is that as a whole, crafting is just more overpowered this expansion, right? There's a whole crafting rehaul. I'm sure you guys have seen all the talent trees for professions and all the things that you can do, right? Trade chat is constantly spammed with all these things. Everybody's trying to farm for that lariat recipe, right? You get gold cap if you found the recipe the first week and sold it. So yeah, I think things like that necklace, and also the ability to just like craft a 405 eye level weapon, like literally at the start of the season, basically. Considering you did some activities, whether it's a rep or 10 mythic pluses or even clear normal, and the fact that we get 2 sparks of ingenuity last week right away. So super easy to like get an OP piece as long as somebody had the recipe. And then the other thing is that I just wasn't super confident in how, I would say, geared I would be from just pugging, because I know that one, because I'm not in a mythic rating guild or I'm not actively rating in one, I wouldn't be able to guarantee that I would clear normal and heroic, right? Because that's something that I've been rely on in the past, is that, hey, if there's a piece of gear that can drop in heroic, especially the last boss, which drops, I think, 4 or 11 eye level weapon, that's huge. But because I can't guarantee that I'm going to be able to clear heroic Raszageth every single week, I actually opted to craft the weapon first. And I didn't even craft the neck, because I wasn't going to be able to guarantee that I would have a good weapon, or that I would have a consistent source of being able to farm for that weapon. So that's kind of what I did to just boost my eye level and damage more kind of in the short term. Get invited into groups easier, right? With that, get more gear that way. And then I'll craft the next list once we get the next spark of ingenuity, which I think from the time this video being out will just be like another week, right? We'll get the next one. But overall, like, it's actually insanely expensive to craft right now, because one, you're crafting early on when the amount of recipes are just not that high. I think in the first week, there were basically on my server, Tichondrius US, which is a relatively large server. I think there were only 2 people that can craft a neck. So you gotta find one of them to be on, and 2 is they're kind of setting the price with as the only 2 people. On top of that, because everybody's skill level isn't still maxed out at the moment, you're likely going to have to use ring 3 materials for all of the crafting mats, and that's just insanely expensive too, right? So luckily I still had gold left over from when everybody sold keys back in BFA, with all those key carrying discords, but it is pretty expensive to be crafting pieces right now. Now, the raid and dungeons, I actually really enjoy the raid. I'm a bit sad that I likely won't see mythic versions for some time. I think 8 bosses is the perfect amount. A few easy bosses to get people started, some middle bosses to kind of like get you better acquainted with movement and abilities, and then a couple of difficult bosses at the end to just really kind of put it all together and test it. So I actually really enjoyed the difficulty ramp of the bosses. And please, Blizzard, keep the boss count within single digits. It makes each boss, I just think, more memorable and so much easier on people's schedules, right? There were many people from how long the Sepulchral raid lasted, myself included, as I actually quit Mythic raiding at that time to just spend more time with my son. I didn't think it was worth it for me to spend, 16 hours a week raiding on top of Mythic Plus, PvP, and on top of the fact that I actually have a job that is completely separate from gaming and WoW. So I think just to require people to spend multiple months, like 3 to 4 months to do that, I think just insane, right? So I like the lower boss counts. Plus it just makes each boss more memorable. Because a lot of times, like in Sepulchre, for example, when I'm re-clearing bosses, I'm just like, I don't even remember what this boss does anymore because there's so many. So I think that's a much better way to go about it. The boss fights themselves, they feel great with the warrior mobility, right? All those knockbacks, knockups, just free pushes for us so we can generate even more rage recharge, right? We have heroic leap. Like there's just so many ways for us to move around the map. And if you really want to, obviously you can always talent to intervene for even more mobility. And also Fury Warriors are just insanely tanky right now, right? Because you're basically having War Paint up the entire time. You get increased armor from talents, which actually increases your damage from other talents, and you also have spell reflect, which don't sleep on spell reflect. Even if you don't reflect the ability, you're still taking reduced magic damage. And a lot of other talents, I guess a couple other talents that also provide some passive healing, passive leech. So you'll often find yourself as one of the last few DPS remaining in fights. And I actually think that really helps fulfill that execute fantasy, because we are living to the end of boss fights, especially in pub groups, right? People are dropping, and we're helping finish off fights with our Juggernaut stack. So I actually really like how it's playing out with how tanky we are, that we can survive to the end, just like the insane amount of self-healing that we have too. Also, Mythic Plus has kind of been interesting, both kind of learning the 4 new dungeons, and also revisiting some of the old ones. Definitely an interesting experience, I would say, when you first enter an old dungeon, expecting certain interactions, but then to realize Blizzard has slightly updated dungeons. One fun one was the Hunter Trap and Quarter Stars doesn't instantly kill 1 to 3 minute bosses anymore, so you might surprise when I told the Hunter to activate the trap, and then we ended up having to deal with 2 mini bosses at once. So just be careful of that there's some changes to the old ones. I didn't get a lot of chance to do PvP, but I do think one thing is that I do really enjoy solo queue shuffle, though I only got to do 2 of it because every time it took me 30 minutes to queue into 1 match. So I don't know how Blizzard can do to impact or influence more healers to queue up, but definitely something needs to be done, because a 30-minute queue timer for a solo queue activity is a bit insane. So I don't know what Blizzard can do for healers, but it is drastically way too high how long you have to queue into it. But I did have fun the 2 times that I went into it, but very limited. But yeah, just wanted to share out where I was on the first week. I'll keep kind of doing this. Obviously goal this week, considering we were able to clear normal first 4 heroic, just to see if I can get ahead of the curve this week on heroic. See where we are there, and then of course next week we can craft the neck. But as always, thanks for checking out the video, guys. Feel free to subscribe to see more. See ya.